I need to tell you something that I found in the Epstein files. And I need you to understand that what I am about to show you is not a conspiracy theory. It is not speculation. It is a real email from a real person sent to Jeffrey Epstein on a real date with real attachments that was buried in millions of pages of documents released by the United States Department of Justice. And it is about silver. Let me give you the context first, because the timing of this is insane. In November 2025, the Epstein Files Transparency Act was signed into law. It required the DOJ to release all unclassified records related to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Since January 2026, the DOJ has released over 3.5 million pages. 3.5 million. That includes emails, bank statements, wire transfer records, FBI interview summaries, flight logs, and portfolio statements. The entire world has been focused on the political names in these files. Presidents, princes, billionaires, tech moguls, and rightly so. But while everyone was looking for the famous names, I was looking at the financial documents. Because that is what I do on this channel. I follow the money. And what I found in those financial documents stopped me cold. I have been covering the silver market on this channel for weeks now. Vault drains, supply chain wars, leverage flushes, the whole picture. But when I came across this document, I had to stop everything I was doing. Because this email, sent in May of 2011, contains a silver squeeze thesis that is so accurate, so precise, and so eerily predictive of what is happening right now in 2026 that it made every hair on my body stand up. And right next to that email, there's a JP Morgan portfolio statement showing that Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman currently sitting in a prison cell for sex trafficking, was buying millions of shares of a silver mining company at the exact same time. Welcome to the hidden economy. Hit subscribe if this is your first time here. I cover what mainstream financial media refuses to touch. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching this video from, because I need to know how many of you are watching the files as closely as I am. If you have been following this series, you know I do not make claims without data. Everything I show you is verifiable. Everything is sourced. And today is no different. So let me show you exactly what I found. The email is dated May 27th, 2011. It was sent by a man named Bernard to an email address associated with Jeffrey Epstein. The subject line reads, Power of Attorney Silver Saint-Tropez. Already, that subject line alone should make you pause. Power of Attorney, Silver, Saint-Tropez, in one line. This is not a casual email between friends. This is a financial manager communicating with his client about account management and investment strategy. Bernard tells Jeffrey that he is leaving his position at a Swiss private bank called Valartis. This is not a regular bank. This is the kind of bank that manages money for people whose net worth starts at 9 figures. He needs Jeffrey to sign a power of attorney on something called financial trust before the end of the month, so Bernard can keep managing the account. In other words, this man is so embedded in Epstein's financial life that even when he changes jobs, the first thing he does is make sure he can keep controlling the money. That is the relationship. Now pay attention to what comes next. Bernard writes, and I quote, I have also enclosed some research I made on the silver market, and I am fully convinced that a squeeze is possible if one can take delivery of 100% of the futures contract. Let me read that again. A squeeze is possible if one can take delivery of 100% of the futures contract. In 2011, a financial advisor to Jeffrey Epstein is writing a detailed thesis about how to squeeze the silver market by taking physical delivery of all the futures contracts on COMEX. And he is not guessing. He enclosed research. The email had attachments, a silver executive summary document, a CME position limits PDF, research on silver companies. This was not a casual mention. This was a structured investment thesis being presented to one of the most connected financial operators in modern history. But it gets deeper. Bernard continues. He writes that the squeeze caused by the 5 increases in margin requirements only squeezed the weak hands. Stop right there. If you watched my video on the silver crash, you know exactly what this means. In 2011, silver ran from around $17 to almost $50. Then the CME raised margin requirements 5 times. 5 times. And the price crashed. Sound familiar? Because in 2026, silver ran from 37 to 121. And what happened? Margins got raised from 5% to 8 to 11 to 15 to 18%. And the price crashed to 64. The exact same playbook, 14 years apart. And Bernard identified it in real time in 2011. He called it what it was, a flush of the weak hands, not a fundamental change, a mechanical liquidation. Then he makes his predictions. He says silver without undue speculation will end the year at $60. He says the inflation-adjusted value is $150. And he says the gold to silver ratio will fall from 40 to under 20 within 36 months. I need to pause here and explain why these numbers matter. Because if you are new to silver, you might not understand how radical these predictions were in 2011. Silver had just crashed from $50 to $32. Every analyst on Wall Street was saying the silver bubble had popped. Every headline was calling silver investors delusional. The mainstream narrative was that silver would go back to $15 and stay there. And in the middle of all that noise, this man is writing to Jeffrey Epstein saying the inflation-adjusted value is $150. He was not following the crowd. He was analyzing the fundamentals, the supply deficit, the industrial demand, the monetary properties, the futures market mechanics, and he came to a conclusion that was the exact opposite of consensus. That takes either extreme conviction or extreme intelligence, or both. Now let me put these predictions in context for 2026. Silver is currently trading at $82. Bernard's $60 target in 2011 was laughed at by the mainstream. But his inflation-adjusted value of $150, adjust that for 14 more years of inflation from 2011 to 2026. You're looking at well over $200 in today's terms. And his gold to silver ratio call? In 2011, it was at 40. Right now in 2026, with gold above 3,000 and silver at 82, the ratio is around 37. It has been compressing exactly as he predicted, just on a longer timeline. This man was not wrong. He was early, and in markets, being early and being wrong look identical. Until suddenly, they do not. 14 years later, the market is proving him right. Now here is where the story gets truly disturbing. And I mean disturbing in a way that connects Epstein's financial world directly to the silver market in a way nobody has explored publicly. Alongside this email, there is a JP Morgan Chase portfolio statement. The account holder is Ghislaine Maxwell. The document is marked confidential treatment requested by JP Morgan Chase. It was never meant to be seen by the public. But here it is, released by the Department of Justice for anyone to read. The document covers December 2010, which is just 5 months before Bernard's silver squeeze email to Epstein. And what does it show? It shows that Ghislaine Maxwell purchased shares of First Majestic Silver Corp through her JP Morgan account. First Majestic is not some random company. It is one of the world's premier pure-play silver mining companies, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. In 2026, its share price is up over 130% since January. Ghislaine Maxwell was buying it 15 years ago, not a small amount. On November 29th, 2010, she bought 100,000 shares. Then on December 6th, she bought 3 million shares. 3 million shares. Through JP Morgan. The total cost on the statement shows approximately $41,000. In the same time period that Epstein's financial advisor was preparing a silver squeeze thesis and attaching CME position limit documents. Let me make sure you understand the web I'm showing you. Epstein's financial advisor writes a detailed plan about how a silver squeeze is possible through physical delivery. Ghislaine Maxwell is simultaneously buying millions of shares of a pure-play silver mining company through an account at JP Morgan. And JP Morgan, the very bank holding Maxwell's account, would later be caught manipulating precious metals markets and pay a $920 million fine in 2020. Let me tell you what they were actually doing, because it connects directly to everything in that email. JP Morgan traders were convicted of spoofing. Spoofing means placing thousands of fake buy or sell orders that you never intend to execute. The purpose is to trick other traders into thinking there is massive demand or supply, which moves the price in the direction you want. Then you cancel the fake orders and profit from the price movement you created. JP Morgan did this in gold and silver markets for over 8 years. 8 years. Multiple traders were personally convicted and sent to prison. The head of JP Morgan's precious metals desk was found guilty of racketeering, not securities fraud. Racketeering, the same charge they use against organized crime. So here's the picture. And I want you to really sit with this for a second, because this is the kind of thing that sounds like fiction, but it is documented in federal court records. Epstein's network is discussing a silver squeeze based on physical delivery. Maxwell is buying silver mining stocks through JP Morgan, and JP Morgan is simultaneously manipulating silver prices through spoofing to keep them suppressed. If you wanted to accumulate a massive position in silver before a squeeze, what would be the ideal scenario? You would want someone suppressing the price while you buy. You would want the price artificially low so you can accumulate as much as possible before the squeeze executes. That is exactly the dynamic these documents reveal, whether it was coordinated or coincidental. I am not saying these things are directly connected. I am saying that the convergence is extraordinary. And I am saying that nobody in mainstream financial media is covering this angle because the Epstein files are so massive, so dense, and so overwhelming that the financial connections are being buried under the political names that generate headlines. Now let me explain why this matters for you right now in 2026. Because this is not just a history lesson. The thesis in that email, the silver squeeze thesis, is more valid today than it was when it was written. Bernard's core argument was simple. If someone takes physical delivery of 100% of the futures contracts, the market squeezes. In 2011, COMEX had enough inventory to cover the contracts. In 2026, that is no longer the case. COMEX registered silver inventory has been in a staircase decline for years. Shanghai vaults have collapsed from 1.265 million kilograms to 350,000. London lease rates are at 4.5%, which signals extreme physical stress. The market is in backwardation, meaning buyers are paying a premium for immediate delivery over future delivery. Every single condition that Bernard described as necessary for a squeeze is now present. Not partially, not theoretically, actually present in the data right now. And this is the part that should terrify anyone who is short silver or sitting on the sidelines. Because I went through Bernard's thesis point by point and checked it against 2026 data. His squeeze requires physical delivery. COMEX delivery notices are surging right now. Large buyers are standing for delivery instead of rolling contracts. His thesis says margin hikes only flush weak hands. We just watched it happen. 121 to 64, 39,000 contracts wiped. But lease rates went UP during the crash, and backwardation got deeper. The weak hands are gone, but the physical market is tighter than ever. His thesis depends on a supply deficit. In 2011, it was a small deficit. In 2026, we are in the 5th consecutive year of deficit, and it is growing. Solar demand has doubled. Electric vehicles, 5G, AI data centers, none of these demand categories even existed in 2011. And his inflation-adjusted value of 150, adjust that for 14 more years of inflation. You get $220 to $240. Silver is at 82. If his analysis was correct, and the directional call has been dead right so far, silver is trading at roughly 1/3 of fair value right now. In 2011, the squeeze failed because the exchanges raised margins 5 times and flushed out leveraged speculators. The weak hands got wiped, but Bernard recognized that the fundamentals did not change. The supply deficit did not change. The industrial demand did not change. Only the leveraged speculative positions changed. And he was right. Because here we are, 14 years later, and silver is higher than his $60 target. The fundamentals won. They just took longer than anyone expected. And here's what makes 2026 different from 2011. In 2011, the buyers trying to squeeze silver were retail traders and small funds. They could be flushed by margin increases. In 2026, the buyers are nation states. China is implementing export controls on silver. The United States has classified silver as a critical mineral. Both superpowers are racing to secure physical supply from Latin America. Sovereign buyers do not get margin called. Sovereign buyers do not care about short-term price volatility. Sovereign buyers take delivery, which is exactly what Bernard told Epstein was the key to the squeeze. Take delivery of 100% of the futures. The mechanism Bernard described in 2011 is now being executed, not by retail traders, but by the most powerful governments on Earth. And they are not doing it to make a trade. They are doing it because silver is a strategic resource that is critical to solar panels, electric vehicles, semiconductors, military technology, 5G infrastructure, and medical equipment. The demand is structural. The supply is declining. And the players are no longer weak hands that can be flushed by margin calls. And here is something that blows my mind. And if you were on the internet in January 2021, this is going to hit different. In January 2021, 10 years after Bernard wrote that email, the Reddit community Wall Street Bets attempted a silver squeeze. They called it the silver squeeze. Millions of retail traders tried to buy physical silver and silver ETFs to force a short squeeze on COMEX. The movement trended worldwide. Silver briefly spiked to $30. But it failed. Why? Because retail traders were buying paper silver through ETFs, not taking physical delivery. The exchanges raised margins again, and the weak hands got flushed again. The exact same pattern as 2011. But here's what nobody noticed. Bernard's email said the squeeze requires taking delivery of 100% of the futures contracts. The Wall Street Bets crowd was buying SLV, which is a paper ETF. They were not taking delivery. They did the opposite of what the thesis required. They tried to squeeze silver the wrong way. The information about how to actually do it was sitting in Epstein's emails the entire time, and nobody had read it yet because the files had not been released. Now in 2026, the buyers are not making that mistake. China is taking physical delivery. The United States is stockpiling through Latin American supply chains. Central banks are accumulating. Everyone has learned the lesson that Bernard articulated 15 years ago. Physical delivery is the weapon. Paper is the distraction. And here is one more detail that will make your jaw drop. In 2011, the year Bernard wrote that email, JP Morgan held 0 ounces of physical silver. 0. By 2017, just 6 years later, JP Morgan had accumulated over 133 million ounces of physical silver, more than the Hunt brothers held when they tried to corner the silver market in 1980. The Hunt brothers owned so much silver that the government had to intervene. Silver went from $6 to over $50 during their squeeze. And JP Morgan quietly accumulated even more than that. The same bank that was spoofing silver prices downward was simultaneously accumulating the largest physical silver position in modern history. They were suppressing the price with one hand and buying with the other. Now here is why this matters beyond the Epstein headline. Because the real insight is not about one email or one person. It is about what that email reveals about how the ultra-wealthy think about assets. When a private banker to one of the most connected financiers in history writes a detailed silver squeeze thesis and attaches CME position limit documents, that tells you something critical. The top of the financial food chain was not dismissing silver as a pet rock. They were studying the exact mechanics of how to corner the market through physical delivery. And they identified the same thesis that is now being executed by sovereign nations 14 years later. That is not a coincidence. That is a playbook. And you just got to read it for free because the DOJ released it. The Epstein files are not just about criminal activity. They are a blueprint. And what the blueprint says is clear. Physical delivery is the weapon. Supply deficit is the fuel. And the only thing that ever stopped the squeeze was flushing weak hands through margin manipulation. The weak hands are gone now. I showed you that in my last video. Open interest on COMEX collapsed from 176,000 contracts to 137,000. The leveraged cowboys have been wiped out. What remains is strong money, patient money, sovereign money, the kind of money that takes delivery and does not sell. Let me connect all the dots for you because if you are still watching, what I'm about to lay out is staggering when you see it all at once. In 2011, Epstein's financial advisor identified the exact mechanism for a silver squeeze. Take physical delivery. In 2010 through 2011, Ghislaine Maxwell was buying millions of shares of silver mining stocks through JP Morgan. In 2020, JP Morgan paid $920 million for manipulating precious metals markets through spoofing. In 2023, JP Morgan settled for $75 million, specifically for their banking relationship with Epstein. In 2025, the United States classified silver as a critical mineral. In 2026, China implemented export controls on silver. Right now, COMEX and Shanghai vaults are draining. Lease rates are at historic levels. The market is in extreme backwardation. And silver sits at $82, while the inflation-adjusted value that Bernard calculated in 2011 translates to over $200 today. Every piece of this puzzle was visible in that single email from 2011. The mechanism, the target, the conditions. And now, 14 years later, every condition has been met, and the players are infinitely more powerful than the retail traders who tried and failed in 2011. I want to be careful here. I do not know if Epstein personally traded silver based on this email. I do not know the full extent of Bernard's relationship with Epstein's financial operations. I do not know if the Maxwell share purchases were coordinated with the squeeze thesis or coincidental. What I do know is that these documents exist. They are in the public record. They were released by the Department of Justice, and they show that the silver squeeze thesis was being discussed and acted upon at the highest levels of private wealth management as early as 2010 and 2011. Here is what I think this means for anyone holding silver right now. The thesis has not changed. It has only gotten stronger. The mechanism is the same. Physical delivery, the fundamentals are the same. Supply deficit. The pattern is the same. Weak hands get flushed, then strong hands accumulate. The only thing that has changed is the scale. In 2011, it was private wealth. In 2026, it is sovereign wealth. In 2011, the squeeze failed because margin hikes flushed the speculators. In 2026, the buyers are governments that do not get margin called. I hold silver. I hold mining stocks. I have skin in this game. And the reason I hold them is not because of an email from the Epstein files. It is because the data, the inventory numbers, the lease rates, the backwardation, the government actions, and yes, the historical evidence that the smartest money in the world has been looking at this trade for over a decade, all point in the same direction. If you have watched my entire series, you now have the most comprehensive picture available anywhere on the internet. Video 1 showed you the vaults draining. Video 2 showed you the $300 price target. Video 3 showed you why the crash was a trap. Video 4 showed you the US-China supply chain war. And this video showed you that the silver squeeze thesis is not new. It has been circulating at the highest levels of global finance since at least 2011. The only difference is that now the conditions to execute it are actually here. Google Epstein files silver. Read the email yourself. Look at the Maxwell portfolio statement yourself. Verify everything I just told you. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at the documents. The email reference number is EFTA 01165353. The JP Morgan statement reference is EFTA 01520542. These are publicly searchable in the DOJ Epstein library. Go look, screenshot them, save them. Because this is the kind of thing that gets memory hold when the news cycle moves on to the next celebrity name in the files. And while you are there, ask yourself one question. If the people in Epstein's financial orbit, the private bankers, the wealth managers, the ultra-high net worth networks, if they were analyzing a silver squeeze in 2011 based on physical delivery mechanics, what do you think they are doing now? In 2026, when every condition they identified has been met? When nation-states are executing the exact playbook they described? When the weak hands have been flushed exactly as they predicted? When the inventory numbers are worse than anything they could have imagined in 2011? When JP Morgan itself accumulated 133 million ounces of the very metal they were manipulating? The smart money saw this coming. They just saw it early. And now the rest of the world is catching up. Slowly, painfully, but inevitably. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Send this to someone who thinks the Epstein files are only about politics. They are about money. They are about metals. And they are about a thesis that is playing out right in front of our eyes. This story is not over. It is accelerating. And the Epstein files just gave us the blueprint that shows the smartest money in the world has known this for 15 years. The question is, what are you going to do with that information now that you have it too? This is the hidden economy. I will see you in the next one.